Brian, I got a problem here. I got a problem because the machine that I want to use for my Minecraft initiative has no operating system, or it has an operating system, but I need it to have this Linux thing that we're being all loud and cocky about.
And I think you got a solution for us today then, right?
I do, and the solution is actually going to be free. And the way you're going to do this, I'll tell you what, let me show you what I got going on my desktop and we'll take a look. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to go out and get yourself the Ubuntu Linux we've been talking about. And so what you can do is just do a Google search, Ubuntu, Ubuntu Linux. And if you do that Google search, most likely the very first one that comes back, or www.ubuntu.com, that's where you want to go. And when you go there, it talks about how, of course, Ubuntu is the greatest thing ever. And of all the different options you have, I'm going to go to download.
Ooh, look, government security assessment.
Oh boy. Now, Linux is actually quite secure, but I'm going to go to download. And you know what? Even though we're setting up a MinecraftEDU server, and this is a little weird, you're like, wait a second, what are we doing here? I thought we were setting up a server. It's okay. You're going to actually download the desktop. And even with the desktop version of Linux, you can very easily create a Minecraft server. It'll be fine. So we're going to go to download, and we're going to rather counterintuitively click on desktop. And this is where we're going to download it. And now on this particular one, if you're in doubt, you can choose 32-bit. Or if you have less than 2 gigs of RAM, you can also choose 32-bit. Now I happen to know for a fact that my Intel NUC is 64-bit capable. So because I know it's a 64-bit system, I'm going to download the 64-bit. And now actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the latest version as we've recorded this is going to be Ubuntu 13.10. That's the desktop version. It's got the graphical user interface. So it's going to look a little bit like Windows. You're going to want that. So this is going to be Ubuntu version 13.10. 64-bit, because I know my system is, that's what it is, and I'm going to click Ubuntu 13.10. And if the internet gods are happy, it's going to take me here. Now I can, of course, it's free, but they don't mind donations, but I'm not going to donate. So I'm going to go all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to say, not now, just take me to the download. And there's going to be a little sad face that appears momentarily, and then it's going to say, oh, there's my download. My download has started. Now it looks like it's about 883 megabytes. So depending on the speed of your internet connection, it's going to download, and that's going to give me an ISO file. And I'll tell you what, Brian, while we're waiting for that to download, and it is downloading, there's a couple more things I'm going to need the machine that I'm installing Ubuntu Linux on. And now let's be very clear about this. We're going to show you how to install Ubuntu Linux with the idea that there is something called dual booting that you can do where you already have Windows on a machine and now you're going to put Linux on it, and then in the very beginning you'll have an option to choose, do I want to boot to Windows, do I want to boot to Linux? And you can do that. In the context of setting up a Minecraft server, we're going to teach you how to install Linux where that's the thing on the system. And if there's anything already on the system, if you follow our steps, please realize it's going to blow away anything on that hard drive. All right, we're very clear about this.
So you're pretty much, you're telling us that you're not going to try it any other way but this way.
Right. What I'm assuming in these steps, don't follow these steps. If you have anything on the machine you're about to install Ubuntu on that's important to you, minimally back it up. Otherwise, stop. Don't do it. But what I'm going to show you will completely and entirely eradicate any data on your machine and replace it with a fresh, shiny new install of Ubuntu Linux. Of course, you'll need the machine that you're going to install Ubuntu Linux on. And I'm also going to have, there's a lot of different ways to install Linux on a machine. I'm going to show you how to do it with the USB drive. So if you have a jump drive, a USB drive, I've got a little one right here. 2 gigs should be all that you need. I think 2 gigs is probably the minimum size for this. If it needs to be larger, I know 4 gigs you'll have room to spare. I think you can do it with 2 gigs. This particular jump drive has 8 gigs, so I've probably got about 4 times what I need to do it. But you're going to need one of these USB drive. And the other thing too, again, with the process we're going to show you, whatever's on this jump drive is going to get completely wiped.
Wiped clean, yeah.
So just realize that everything we're showing you here, I'm showing you how to destroy all the data, both on your computer and your USB drive, all in the same video. So keep that in mind. Right. And then we're going to pick it back up on the desktop. Now, not only do we need to download our Ubuntu Linux file, it's actually an ISO file. It's basically an image of a DVD that's in file form. So it's one single file that has the entire Ubuntu installer on it. The other thing that we're going to download is a utility. Now I'm assuming that we're on a Windows computer. Windows computers are the most common. Most people have access to a Windows computer. And on a Windows computer, I want you to do another Google search to go out and look for this Linux Live USB. Just do a Google search for Linux Live USB, and it's going to bring you to this site. Well, actually, it's www.linuxliveusb.com.
Oh, how convenient.
How convenient. And so what we're going to do here is we've got Linux Live USB. It's going to take you to this website, and this is going to enable you to this is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take the ISO file that we downloaded, the Linux install file, that we would typically write that to a DVD, but we're not going to write it to a DVD. We're going to write it to a USB drive, and then we're going to boot our machine off of the USB drive to actually do the install of Ubuntu Linux. And that's why when in this utility, this Linux Live USB creator, when it copies that Ubuntu installer to this USB, it's going to wipe it out. It's going to format it, it's going to reformat it and wipe it out. So that's what the Linux Live USB creator does. Again, it's another free tool that you can use. Let me show you how to download it. Pretty straightforward. You just go to, again, linuxliveusb.com, and I'm going to click download. And when I do that, it comes up and says, hey, here's the latest version. And I'm going to download it and save it. And that's going to put it right on my, ultimately what I'm going to do with all these downloads is I'm going to put them right to my desktop. Transition. And so really what I'm left with is I now have two files on my desktop that I've downloaded. I have the Ubuntu ISO file. That's basically the file that has all the entire installer for Ubuntu Linux. And I have this Live USB creator. Now the first thing I'm going to have to do is install the Linux Live USB creator on my Windows system. All right, and to do that, I'm going to do like this with any other executable in Windows. I'm going to double click, answer yes to any security provisioning things that come up, and then it says welcome to Linux Live USB setup. I'm going to click next, yes, put it to let's go ahead and put it to that destination folder, and I'll click install. And now with that Linux Live USB creator installed, you're going to see that if you go in your start menu, here I have, I think it puts it in multiple locations, but for sure it's going to be here in your programs menu. You have Linux Live USB creator, and I can just run it from right here. Linux Live USB creator, say yes, it's okay to run. It's not a security threat. And this is what the interface is going to look like. Now notice what it does. It says, hey, we need a USB key, and then we need a disk image, an ISO file for the CD or DVD that you want to put on this USB key. And now what that's going to do is that's going to make this is not only going to put the Linux installer on the USB key, it's also going to write special data to this jump drive. It's going to make it bootable.
It's sort of like a little starter key for your car.
Yeah. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to be able to put this in the machine, and with the machine off, and then when I turn the machine on, I'm gonna tell this machine to boot off of the USB stick and not the hard disk drive inside.
Right.
So I'm gonna have it boot to here. Basically, what I'm doing is instead of having plus with my little machine, there's fewer and fewer machines being shipped with optical drives. DVD drives, CD drives. So what I'm doing is instead of using an installer disk, like you might have had like disks in the past that have your Windows or your Mac OS X, instead of using disks, I'm using a USB key for that. Now, here's what we're going to do. If I show you what's going on my desktop. Now in step one, it's going to have you choose whichever USB key you want to use. I've just inserted my USB drive, and here it is. It's the in my particular case, it's the E drive, but I put in an 8 gig jump drive. It's showing 7.4 gig. That's the one I want to use. Now, that says, hey, step one, here's the USB drive that I'm going to turn into the boot device that's going to install Ubuntu Linux. And now step two is, hey, where's that ISO file? Where is that disk image for the Ubuntu Linux installer? And I'm going to click on this right here. And I'm just going to browse to my desktop because that's where I put the ISO file that we downloaded off the Ubuntu site right here. Remember Ubuntu 13.10 desktop version? There it is, and it's 883 megabyte glory. It's a disk image file. I'm going to click open. So now I'm going to choose the source. It's going to check the file for me, which is great. It comes back and tells you if it's on the compatibility list or not. Even if it shows up and says it's not on a compatibility list, don't freak out. It's going to be fine. If you follow these instructions and use the tools we're showing you, you're going to be in good shape. The step 3 is setting up this persistence. Just skip it. It automatically sets it to 0. That's for if you wanted to actually boot to the USB drive and use Linux off the USB drive. That's not what we're doing. We're installing Linux onto our computer. So for step 3, it defaults to 0 megabytes. We're just going to leave it there. And then for step 4, we got some options in step 4. Hide created files on key. That's optional. Format the key. If you want to actually do a clean install on that USB drive, I would recommend go ahead and do that. Go ahead and format the key, and then it'll do that. And then the third option is enable launching Linux live in Windows. We're not going to need that, so you can leave that unchecked. Now, once you've done that, you've got these 4 things in step 4. You're going to click the lightning icon, and it's going to start the installation of Ubuntu Linux onto your jump drive.
So it's that easy to just put it on your little jump drive, and now you've got a starter key.
That's it, yeah. And you can see it's going to take a couple minutes. It's going to clean up the drive. It's going to extract the ISO file onto that USB drive. But then once it's done, once that's done, you're going to have a USB drive that's bootable, and it will boot right into the installation procedures for Ubuntu Linux.
So now, Andrew, if I was to take that little key then and go into another computer, I could literally damage another computer, though, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're going to want to be careful with this drive. Now that you've got a bootable drive, when you there's a couple things you might have to do to show a machine how to boot to a USB device, and we're going to show you that actually in the next segment.
Excellent, good.
But yes, you do want to be careful with this because you have every potential in the world of sticking this USB drive into something, turning it on, and completely wiping it out. So be cautious. Make sure that you're sticking this USB drive in the machine that you want to install Ubuntu Linux on. And again, in the context of what we're doing, you could do dual booting. There's a lot of things you can do here. Again, we're making this simple and approachable. We're assuming that whatever machine you're doing this on, understand, folks, you are completely wiping that machine, wiping everything on it, and afterwards you're going to have, again, that shiny new installation of Ubuntu Linux.
Excellent.
So once we get our, in the next segment, we're going to start off, we're going to have our bootable USB key, our bootable USB drive, ready to go. We're going to have our computer that we want to install this on, and we are going to be off like a herd of turtles installing Ubuntu Linux on our hardware. Stay tuned.